So we are on chapter 5, like you mentioned, and chapter 1 essentially just introduces everybody that is going to play a role in the Bhagavad Gita. Actually, not really everybody. Most of the people that are mentioned in chapter 1, we never hear about them again. And then we're really left with Krishna and Arjuna for the rest of the text. And then, but that's a lot of introduction, just because, again, Bhagavad Gita is taking place in a battlefield. So the main question is, oh, how do we get there? How did the war start? So chapter 1 essentially just names everybody who was a player that contributed to that war starting, the main generals and captains, etc. But then again, we never hear from them again. Chapter 2 is really where Bhagavad Gita starts, and Krishna, who is the Supreme Person, is teaching Arjuna vital lessons, which again he does throughout the entire Bhagavad Gita. And the Arjuna is his cousin in the history of the Bhagavad Gita, but also one of his best friends and a main warrior, very, very powerful warrior, who has a really big dilemma about fighting that war, because he sees on the other side people that he loves, friends, relatives, spiritual masters, etc. So he really has a hard time having to fight them, not out of fear, but actually because of the conviction he had, I'm a very powerful warrior, and if I engage in this war, I'm actually going to kill everybody. So I don't want to do it. And Krishna is really helping him in that really bad predicament. First teaching that Krishna gives to Arjuna is that, hey, you're not the body, you are the soul within the body. So essentially the difference between matter and spirit. And then with that knowledge, Krishna urges Arjuna to do your duty in the material world while you're here, but don't be attached to the results, which can go right to the heart of what Arjuna was struggling with, because you're not really killing anybody, since the spirit soul is eternal. And if you recognize you are not that body, the body comes and goes, but we are not it. We are the soul living within. And with that knowledge, we should then do our duty and don't be attached to the results. Arjuna, being a soldier, a big, powerful warrior, his duty was most certainly to fight in that war. And Krishna is urging him, hey, do your duty, which is to fight, and don't be attached to the results, which is all the lamentation you're talking about. Now, I'm being a little bit more elaborate here in our context, because you mentioned for maybe somebody who is tuning in for the first time. And I do want to stop here and bring about a huge question mark that would be in my mind if I'm hearing this for the first time, which would be, hey, you guys are Hindus and this is a religion, and maybe I'm coming from Western religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and I'm sick and tired of hearing about wars and people killing each other in the name of religion. And I thought that I was going to look towards the East and find something like Hinduism, Buddhism, or let's say Hinduism in our case. And therefore, I'm interested in Bhagavad Gita. And the first thing you're telling me is that the whole thing is taking place in the battlefield and people are about to fight and kill each other. And furthermore, this is the Supreme Person here, God, urging somebody to go and kill everybody. Like, that's terrible. That sounds very jihadist to me. That would be a huge turnoff. Well, the Bhagavad Gita is one tiny book amidst one of the biggest book there is, which is called the Mahabharata. And the Mahabharata details every single thing that led to that war. And if one has interest, it's certainly, most certainly, completely out of the scope of this class. But let's just say that there are phenomenal reasons which would be like a huge, like a movie almost, and it would be tremendous. The unfolding of everything that happened to lead to this war. And essentially, we could say in a nutshell, Krishna, being the Supreme Person, which is to say God, has to come down to our planet to interfere when the planet is really dominated by really bad elements. Think Hitler, Stalin, Mao, people that killed millions, hundreds of millions of people for based on their anger and lust and greed. So at times in our planet, the world unfortunately is dominated by demoniac people, people of that nature that are really malevolence personified, like actual evil, evil-minded people, let's say. And at that time, really, there's, let's say, the good people cannot fight against the bad people because the bad people are so much more powerful and strong, and there's no hope. So at that time, Krishna, God, recognizing that predicament, he comes down to earth himself to set things straight, let's say. And then he will recruit the remaining good people around him and go fight against demoniac people. So the people that they are fighting against, they're really, really bad people. Again, if you think about Hitler, Mao, or Stalin all put together, they would be nothing. These people that are here on the other side of the battlefield are much worse than them together, let's say. So Krishna is now here. So with that small context of the Mahabharata, and now I'll move forward now. So Krishna is really encouraging Arjuna, like, no, we really have to do this. It's for the best of the world. And so that's chapter 2. On chapter 3, Krishna is moving on to, you must understand that you are part of something much bigger, because Arjuna is still struggling, dealing with these predicaments of fighting. Krishna then switches by teaching that, hey, if you're having a hard time with this, then do your duty because you are a part of something much bigger. Be aware of that, know that. That there are other forces, metaphysical forces controlling our universe. So then if this teaching is at first is too much to you, then recognize that, again, you are a small part of something much bigger, and be connected to that, because that eventually will take you to a place where you are ready for a higher spiritual teaching, which is to say subtle things. For example, we are offering our food to Krishna. Then why do we do that? Well, because we recognize that Krishna does exist and he does accept our offering, making it what we call prasad, which is his mercy, which then we take and we derive benefits from that. So by recognizing this, we can continue to remain connected to something higher than ourselves and little by little make more spiritual progress. So then chapter 4 and then chapter 5, where we are here right now, towards the end of chapter 5, we are ending it today, continues that trend where Arjuna is having a hard time about fighting, and Krishna is trying to give him reasons, spiritual reasons, material reasons why he should engage in this fight. And we get to chapter 5 here. Krishna is really, and then also a lot of chapter 4, Krishna is really painting a world where we are going to struggle. Like there is heat and cold. Like sometimes it's too hot, sometimes it's too cold. Sometimes we have anger, sometimes we have peace. Sometimes we look at people and we judge them. Sometimes we look at other types of people and we love them. So then there's all these forces that we will struggle with in the world. And Krishna, as a great friend, is trying to help Arjuna deal with all of the situation by really encouraging Arjuna to be equipoised and not really consider the whims of the mind that wants to push away the things that makes us suffer and hurt, and embrace the things that we consider to be good, things that are going to give us pleasure. So it essentially brings us here now to the last quarter, I would say, of chapter 5, where it seems to me, Kim, that still one of the biggest theme right here is duality, right? The different ways in which we perceive pains and pleasures in the world, and how we can get so caught up in that mentality. Certainly it's part of what Arjuna is experiencing. He's experiencing, hey, I don't want to do this one thing, which my mind is telling me is bad, which is to go and kill people that are bad. Uh, I want to do this other thing, which is be more peaceful and go to the forest and meditate, not engage into this one thing. So there are all these dualities in the world that can really bewilder us and really confuse us, increase our ignorance in terms of what to do. And Krishna then is laying now a platform of peace to be equipoised, do our duty, don't be attached to the results. We are eternal. We are souls living within the body, but we are not the body. And allow yourselves to handle the dualities of the world, tolerating them without being disturbed. And in that platform, we can find a lot of peace, on top of which true knowledge can start, can begin to develop. And Krishna is now urging Arjuna really to be situated in a position of equanimity. So, and I do believe that dualities is the biggest thing here at this point in chapter 5. What are your thoughts on that, Kim?
Yeah, thank you for such a thorough background and context leading up to where we are today. The point you made about Krishna going into detail about dualities and kind of helping us through what it looks like to struggle in this world, and just acknowledging that this isn't easy and this isn't an easy path, and giving us so much detail. That's been one of the themes that I've really appreciated about studying the Gita, is seeing how so much of the texts are so relatable in 2020. And it's amazing to me. This was written so long ago, and Krishna, in his divine wisdom, just knows how to make it applicable and relatable for us, so that it's not some pie in the sky, oh, be enlightened, you're not the body, and just walks away. He sticks in it, stays in it with us, and gives us really specific examples repeatedly about how to, yeah, apply the cognitive, the knowledge, into the behavior of what our actions could be, to kind of take it one step at a time.
Correct. And it leads us to the first text we covered. And again, I think it's going to start speaking right to this theme of dualities, right? So um, the humble sages, by the way, this is chapter 5, text 18. It reads, the humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, and an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. So that's actually the last test that we covered in our previous episode. But Tukaram did mention this text once again. And again, that duality, right? So we now have here gentle Brahmana, which is the highest person in society, and dog eater, who would be like the lowest person in society. And there are all these dualities, but that humble sage, which is definitely a person that we want to be like, sees these dualities as equal because they recognize the truth of we not being the body. Our actual existence is that we are the soul. It's not that we are a body and we have a soul, but rather we are the soul and we are having a material bodily experience. But if you are a sage, which is to say a very, very highly advanced in spiritual knowledge person, you can see through that. So then these dualities of these different bodies, even high members of society, low members of society, and even within the animals, I'm seeing everything equal. So there is that Krishna trying to balance these dualities and makes us more centered in one objective reality, which is the spiritual reality. So Krishna is really trying to aim us towards that. Text 19 reads, those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. They are flawless like Brahman, and thus they are already situated in Brahman. Again, birth and death, like the dualities here. So when a baby is born, that's an extraordinary experience. Everybody's happy and we celebrate birthdays and this is great. But then inevitably, when somebody dies, then everybody's sad and we are crying, we're lamenting, etc. So there's this duality. But Krishna is talking about here, hey, if your mind is established in sameness and equanimity, then you have already conquered even this biggest duality, I would argue, is perhaps birth and death. And you are dealing with that with equanimity. You have conquered even the duality of birth and death, which is to say a lot, right? Like, who is not afraid of death? You have to truly understand I am not this body in order to really not be intimidated by death. And then another point that came in class, which I thought was really interesting, which is how this text ends. And thus they are already situated in Brahman. So they are flawless like Brahman, and thus they are already situated in Brahman. Brahman really means the like an impersonal type of energy that pervades all of the entire universe, and that's Brahman. I guess in Christianity, we could say the Holy Spirit. But we are already situated in that. We are already that. It really points here to a possibility where even in this material world, without leaving the body and attaining the spiritual realms again, there's a possibility that we can already be in this platform. In fact, I'll go to the next text here, which is chapter 5, text 20. A person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant, nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered, and who knows the science of God, is already situated in transcendence. Again, the 2 points that we're elaborating on here, the dualities and dealing with them by accepting it, not trying to fight it against it. Hey, this is just where I am. If there's an earthquake, there's an earthquake. If it's too hot outside, it's too hot outside. If it's too cold outside, it's too cold outside. We shouldn't allow our happiness to depend on these outside factors of which we have no control over. So again, the duality portion in there, Krishna urging us to be unbewildered about them. And if we are able to do that, Krishna then says, you are already situated in transcendence, which to me is such great news because Krishna is really prescribing that we do this, but then also giving an example of how it is, because some people are able to do that, right? So it's prescriptive and descriptive. And
Yeah, and I really like the theme of equanimity coming through here, where even in the good times or the bad times, when we label things as good or unfortunate, suffering and happiness, we're supposed to have this this sameness, this equal attitude towards it. And I think it highlights the idea of Krishna as the ultimate enjoyer. And so if something good happens, it's really Krishna's to begin with and not really ours. And we don't really have that all important effect on our lives that we think we do. I like how Tukaram, when he's talking about when we start to meditate and chant our mantras, that we shouldn't on a good day say, oh, I'm going to instead chant 1 round, I'm going to chant 16 rounds today. Because if on a good day you chant 16 rounds, what are you going to do on a bad day? You're going to chant 0 rounds. And so really having a slow and steady wins the race attitude is really pervasive through our philosophy.
and that makes so much sense because in my experience in the world, I have had, relatively speaking, terrible things happens to me because all of our experiences are unique. So let's say that the most pleasant of experience we have had, we label that experience number 10. And the worst of the experiences we have had, we say that's experience number 1, right? So I have had number 1 things, which in my individual, relative, subjective experience is terrible. And then great things, right, that happen as well. So in my experience, I have had terrible things happen to me, and I have had magnificent things happen to me. But throughout both, one thing that is for sure, they both come to an end. Like the things that were terrible, after some time, they're not that terrible anymore. It may take more time, certain things over others for us to get over it, but I certainly gotten over them, and they no longer bother me. And the things that were absolutely fantastic, I rejoiced upon achieving that. But then again, in time, they kind of fade away, and we're back to Monday morning and getting up early to go to work again, right? So they kind of fade away. So if when good things happens, we get all bent out of shape and go party like crazy and so on, then all the things that can happen, right? Like drunk driving, uh, unwanted pregnancies, etc., then like you're not really knowing how to handle your happiness. And vice versa, when bad things happen, then what are we going to do? Get depressed, commit suicide, start taking pills. So both are extreme. And it just makes sense. I mean, unfortunately, it takes the supreme personality of Godhead to come over here and tell us that. But I also believe that simply by a thought experiment, we can conclude this truth. Both good and bad, they come to an end. And it would be in our best interest to remain equipoised, to remain in the middle, to remain um, fixed in equanimity, because then we are more objective in our appraisal of the world. We can see things more clear and not go to either of the extreme sides.
Yeah, less
Yeah, less
volatile.
volatile.
Correct. Do you want to read text 21?
Sure. Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, where he concentrates on the supreme.
Now, how about that, right? Because unlimited happiness, like I just mentioned that I have had great experiences and they came to an end, which means they were not unlimited. So I get a big question mark here. Like, really? Unlimited happiness? And if that's a possibility, to me, it's worthwhile investigating. And Krishna is pointing that this is within, not without. Again, I'm not the body, I'm the soul. And so they are, the composition of the soul is that it is spiritual, right? That's really what we mean by being spiritual. It's not really going with the flow and doing whatever your heart's desire wants. There's a definition here, like we're gonna be who we are, which the soul is located in the heart. And that's what it means to go within. Like if I go there where I am in my heart regions, then I am going within. And what I'm experiencing is of a spiritual nature because it is myself. And my actual nature as a spiritual being is to actually be happy and have true knowledge, knowledge which doesn't allow me to confuse anymore my existence with this body, but instead my existence now is linked to me, the soul. And then Krishna is saying, hey, if you do that, then you can experience unlimited happiness. That's a very interesting hypothesis to me, worthwhile experimenting with to see whether or not it's true. Because all the things in the outside world, we already know what's going to happen. Like I mentioned earlier, there is going to be a beginning and an end to everything, both good and bad, and ultimately to ourselves. Like Krishna just mentioned, birth and death. All of our psychological garbage will end at some point. And what was the point of it? I was just talking to my wife the other day. You know, the Roman Empire at some point covered a very large territory of planet Earth. And the Roman emperor was the most powerful man in the world, not like the president of the United States right now, who is considered to be the most powerful man in the world. Because yeah, he may be the most powerful man in the world, but the second or third most powerful man in the world, they're actually really powerful as well. Maybe we can point out to Vladimir Putin or Qi from China, and like those nations, those leaders, they're actually very powerful. And if World War III was to break out, that's going to be terrible, terrible consequences. But the Roman Emperor, when the Roman Empire was at its peak, nobody could have really challenged that. There would be some battles here and there, but like their force, their strength was overwhelming to anything else. And today, unless you're really into history, I would argue that most people don't even know, like, what was the name of the last Roman emperor? Do you know, Kim?
No.
And we are lovers of knowledge. We are sincerely currently studying spiritual things, psychological things, metaphysical things, historical, political. Like, I know you, right? And I know us in our congregation. We are lovers of knowledge. And what was even the name of the guy? We don't even know. Like, what was Rome's last emperor's name? And that was a really powerful man. And it's done. He died. That was quite some time ago, and we don't even know his name. We don't even know what he did. So what you speak of us, who are not the emperor of Rome, our psychological garbage, our likes and dislikes, our whims, is certainly going to be forgotten within a few years after our death, or let's say a few generations. So why be so bewildered about all of the things that really tick our buttons, let's say, right? The things that really makes us upset and the things that really makes us happy. Why not take a more equanimity approach, right? And be more settled, like enjoy peace more than very elated happiness, where like you're so excited that you don't know how to act anymore and you start doing bad things, or you're so depressed that like pain is like consuming so much of yourself. How about peace as an alternative? So that's really what Krishna is talking about here, this equanimity, and again, the possibility of being within and enjoying unlimited happiness, right?
Yeah, and I like that up until this point in that sentence, he's talking about equanimity, and good things and bad things. But then he does bring up unlimited happiness. So all of a sudden we're back to the top thing, but that has to do with concentrating on the supreme. And that's very real in my life, where what's consistently happy? My relationship with Krishna never disappoints, never brings me down. If anything changes there, I'm the X factor. And so this life of worship and cultivating that relationship, it's so true. Like it is okay to be in that, and possible to be in that unlimited happiness upstage, but we're looking in the wrong places.
I like to substantiate that because you made a great point, and I don't want to just move forward with um, allowing it to be dogmatic, let's say, because I think this is a very strong point, important point. Uh, Theologically speaking, which I'm just going to state that premise right now, without really trying to defend it, we're going to accept it as truth and self-evidence at this point, but we can certainly dig in and theologically talk about this. But let's say that the true God is a capital G, triple G God, right? God is all good, God is all powerful, and God is all knowledgeable. So theologically speaking, those are the characteristics of God. So if God is all good, then really there is no bad there because he's all good. So anything that is bad is not part of God. He's also all knowledgeable. Well, like, what does knowledge do to us? Like, if we are not confused and if we have true knowledge of what's going on, we can attain peace. We can attain things the way we want them to be, like in a perfect harmony of love and peace and happiness, right? And if we are all powerful, we have the power with which we can establish this happiness and this peace. So that's the nature of God. And when we say we are the soul, that we are spiritual souls, that means we are a part of that God. You can say that God is a mountain made out of gold, and we are a ring made out of gold. In essence, we are both gold, but in quantity, God is great because it's a mountain, and we are tiny because we are a little ring, but we are both gold. So now, with that in mind, if God is all good, if the nature of spirit itself is to be good and to be intelligent and wise and have knowledge, all knowledge, and to be all powerful, which means we're not going to be subdued by forces of evil because we are all powerful, then happiness will reign. Happiness is the natural state. Happiness is supreme. And if we have the possibility of an experience of a relationship of love with the phenomenal object of love, which is God, is a mountain full of gold, made out of gold, right? Spirit, then we would ultimately be happy. And that relationship of love with that God would be unlimited because he is that from which everything comes and is still evolving. It's not that God is the total sum of everything, but you can add up everything and that's where that ends. No, God is everything and he's still expanding. He's still always getting bigger and better. So therefore, unlimited happiness is found within, because we are now going to be focusing in our spiritual existence as opposed to our material existence, which, as we've been discussing here, is full of dualities of happiness and distress, and ultimately they both end. But if we are focusing within, focusing in our spiritual existence, especially in relationship to the supreme spiritual existence, which is God, and that is done by establishing a loving relationship, that's unlimited happiness, and it is within. So that's what we really mean. That's what Krishna is really pointing towards. Go within, and you're going to find unlimited happiness there.
Very well said. Thank you.
Yeah. And do you mind reading the other texts as well?
Sure. Text 22. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. Such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them.
I mean, right?
That's
like
what you just said.
That's what we're just saying here. Like, that's the supreme person saying this. Like, so how seriously should we take that, right? I know, Kim, you do a lot of um, not consultation, but like
Counseling, therapy.
Counseling, yes. And I know you're a sincere student of spiritual, metaphysical topics, and therefore that counseling is of tremendous value. And in one sense, the intention of this podcast is also to broadcast spiritual truth that can help somebody who is listening, and in that sense, counseling them, right? But here's the supreme person saying this, right? How limited are we? But this is the supreme personality of Godhead counseling us. And that's what is urging us to do and to be.
Yeah, a lot of people get caught up in, oh, I can't look at spirituality or think about those things until I solve this heartbreak from my breakup with my ex, or until I can, make a better living. And I just don't want to think about those things. But when you look here, just with this verse as a prime example, there's so much wisdom here that could actually help someone pick them up out of their suffering while they're in the thick of it. And so.
Right. And there's also this sense of not really needing the supreme person to tell us this, or a divine revelation like such as the Bhagavad Gita. Again, introspective, let's say sober and sincere thought experiments will allow any introspective person that is reflecting on these topics sincerely to recognize that, yes, the worst of your nightmares, the worst of your sufferings is going to come to an end. It's just a matter of time. So how much more anger do we want to allow ourselves to go down to before we recognize that, hey, just try to control yourself. It is going to end. It's just a matter of time. And something good will come. And that something good will also end. Right? So it's a tremendous counseling act here that Krishna is putting up. And it is true beyond my book versus your book, or the Bible says this, but the New Testament or the Old Testament or the Quran or the Gita or the Kabbalah or whatever it may be, this is true no matter what. Is our experiences in the world will prove this. And Krishna is being such a great friend in telling us this. Now, I think the next verse really gets to the point of what we're trying to say about happiness even here. Would you mind going for it?
Yeah, text 23, before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated and is happy in this world.
So how about that, right? We don't even have to die to attain that spiritual transcendence that we are discussing here, that would be bound in unlimited happiness due to our loving relationship with God. Like there's a saying that says everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. And that's an interesting thing, like it's a bumper sticker, right? We can say, yeah, that's true. And then you can contemplate that. Well, Krishna is solving that dilemma here. It's like, yeah, it's true. I want to go to heaven. If I'm be honest with myself, I want to go to a better place than where I am now. Even if the place where I am is good, I still would like to go to some place that is even better. Who wouldn't want that? Which sane person, psychologically healthy person would not aspire for that? But do I necessarily want to die if that's my cost to go to heaven? Am I ready to let go? Am I ready to let go of the things which I believe are attractive in this world and which I temporarily possess? Let's say my wife, my children, my house, my job, etc. You fill in the blank for yourself personally. The things that you do derive some kind of temporary happiness from in this material world, those things that you are attached to in this material world. Are you ready to let go of those things to attain this hypothetical heavenly place? Or your body itself, like, is it gonna be painful? Like, how am I gonna die? Am I gonna experience a lot of pain? Is it gonna be a car accident? And then I stay like in the hospital like for 2 weeks, like, oh, so much pain, right? Or is it going to be in my sleep? Obviously, that would be the best thing, right? Let it be that I die in my sleep, have a heart attack, never even wake up. That would be a good scenario. But still, are we ready to let go? Are we ready to say, I'm no longer this body? So that's an interesting bumper sticker, right? I want to go to heaven, but I don't want to die. It's a dilemma. But Krishna here is so elegantly solving that dilemma. He's saying, hey, forget about dying. You can achieve this unlimited happiness even while you're here. You don't even have to give up the body. All you need to do is embrace this knowledge, this vision that check the forces of anger, the forces of desire itself, greed, hate, and tolerate these urges, thus conquering these dualities and remaining fixed in equanimity. And Krishna says, if you are able to do that, you don't even have to die to go to heaven. You can be happy right here, right now. And when you die, you're still going to go to heaven. So you have nothing to lose and everything to gain simply by, again, I want to keep on going back to this point. It's not necessarily a theological point here. It's not necessarily a religious proposition. It's a fact. It's if you are able to tolerate anger and not act upon it, if you're able to tolerate greed and lust, then what's really going to disturb you? How really are you not going to be happy or at least peaceful? And within that peace, you're not bent out of shape, let's say. That is a much better way of living life. But Krishna say, hey, if you can do that, it seems to me that since in Sanskrit, which is definitely what we subscribe to in terms of language in our Hindu scriptures, there is no word, there's no word for evil. There's no word for the devil. It doesn't even exist. As in Christian, let's say contrasting to Christian tradition, there's actually a demon. There's actually like a devil there. And God is in the box ring, right? So God and the devil are throwing blows, like who's going to win, God or the devil, right? And whoever wins is like, oh my gosh, let it be God, because if it's the devil, it's going to be terrible. So it seems that there's that duality going on in there, right? But in the Eastern scriptures, in Sanskrit, the word for the devil or evil doesn't even exist, because evil is brought about in the world, malevolence is brought about in the world by ourselves because of our anger, how we act in a very anger manner in the world. Again, think Mao, Hitler, and Stalin. To me, that's evil personified, but it's actually their own anger that is being manifested in the world. Contrasting to that, we have the saints that have walked earth, our gurus, Jesus Christ, that kind of counterbalance that anger with that love. So it really seems to me here that Krishna is also pointing to that like, hey, if you are able to tolerate anger, then you are happy. There is no devil. If you're able to tolerate anger, there's not gonna be any negative force that is going to subdue you, that is going to put you in hell, let's say, because you're now peaceful and happy in the world without even have to die before going to heaven.
Yeah, and I like in this verse how, once again, Krishna is bringing up tolerating the urges of the material senses. A lot of times people perhaps look at our four regulative principles, which are just basically vows that people take towards their activities and actions in the spiritual world, such as not eating meat or not gambling. And it may seem like, oh, that's just unnecessary, rigorous behavior. It seems to create a lot of suffering in doing that. But there's a point to it, a very serious point to regulating our lifestyle, and that is to control the senses so that we are able to then seek something else. I really liked in Tukaram's class how he brought up the different stages of dualities, how there are different dualities in our spiritual path. Whereas in the beginning, it's spiritual life means not drinking alcohol or not having casual sex. I was a raging alcoholic for many years, so I know very well the pitfalls and the cycles being on a gerbil wheel when you're stuck in that pattern. And so back then, of course, I had no desire for spirituality or anything beyond where my next drink came from. And then in your, Tukram was saying, in your immediate stage of spirituality in your spiritual life, then it's dealing with things like pride and judgment or fame or criticism or resentment. And then as you go beyond that, it becomes, well, maybe there are dualities around being pious, like, oh, I'm a devotee. People think of me as a devotee, and the feelings that, the egoic feelings that come from that. So I really liked how he laid out kind of a map of how your dualities are going to change as you progress through spiritual life. But right here, it's just emphasizing that the material senses are the biggest pitfall, and being able to control that and checking the force of desire and anger. So force is a strong word. You know, where is your anger coming from? And typically it's from hurt feelings from very long ago that have nothing to do with your present situation.
So very well said, Kim. I actually wanted to touch on this point and elaborate on it as you did, but I can't add anything to it. So I'm just going to leave it at that. You said it perfectly. Um, yeah, it's this dualities will always exist all the way up to the most pious version of ourselves, right? Well, I'm super pious and I'm a pujari in the altar, which is to say I have purified myself enough for a long period of time that I can now step into the altar where the deities are and directly worship them and provide service to them. That's what a pujari means. So let's say I'm a pujari here now, but then there's the other pujari there. And is that pujari more pious than I am? So then there's dualities there, right? So these things are going to accompany us throughout seemingly our entire journey. And the sooner we learn how to deal with them, the better. And something else I liked, that duality that Tukaram brought up, is the duality of really making it simple. There is a bucket of everything that brings you closer to Krishna, and there's a bucket of everything that takes you away from Krishna. And that's the only duality left. And then now we learn how to really let go of everything that takes us away from Krishna, and only embrace those things that brings us closer to Krishna, no longer having the duality, because now we're only interested in that which takes us closer to Krishna, which would be the perfection of our spiritual existence.
Yeah, I love that bucket visualization. It makes it pretty simple. So
Right. Because, internally, whether it was given to us by our association, let's say the members of our spiritual congregation, or something that we read in the sacred scriptures, our gurus, our teachers, right? We know what are the things that is going to take us closer to Krishna. We know what are the things that is going to take us away from Krishna. We know that. But then again, like you mentioned so nicely, at the beginning, there will be more growth. Oh, let's give up promiscuity. Let's give up intoxication, etc. Those are the things that's going to take us away from Krishna. And then more mental, right? Or resentments. I don't want to talk, I don't want to gossip about people any longer, right? But then, okay, the pujari this versus the pujari that, which one am I better pujari than that pujari, right? But ultimately, it's just two buckets, things that takes us closer to Krishna and things that takes us away from Krishna. And we get rid of the things that takes us away from Krishna, we're left with only one thing, no longer a duality,
yeah, so true. All right, so do you want to read text 24 then?
Yes, one whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the supreme, and ultimately he attains the supreme. Again, going in, like Krishna is talking about, like he said in here so many times, right? So one whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, that's two, and whose aim is inward, that's three, is actually the perfect mystic. He's liberated in the supreme, and ultimately he attains the supreme. So again, it really points that by going outwards, all we're going to be faced with are dualities. And it's going to really get us bent out of shape, like not knowing how to deal with those things. I'm so happy and I'm so sad. But when we go within, we find that more peaceful, more qualitatively better type of happiness. And Krishna is really urging us to go within. And text 25, those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, and who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. Again, Krishna is almost being repetitive here. It shows how compassionate he is, how strong of a point this is, and how much he really wants us to get it. Those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, right? So Krishna is really go within, forget about the dualities of the world. Text 26, those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. What are your thoughts on that?
It's very inspiring in the very near future. I really like the encouragement and inspiration that comes from Krishna believing in us, that, oh, in this lifetime, you can achieve these things. And oh, it can actually be in the very near future. Because sometimes I don't always believe that it's going to be in the very near future.
Yes, I agree. It's very inspiring. And I think it goes along with the verses that we were discussing earlier, that, we don't have to die to go to heaven, that we can experience this happiness even in the world. So Krishna is saying, hey, give a sincere shot to this essentially philosophy that he's giving us. And if you do that sincerely, you can start experiencing these things in the very near future. Right, Kim?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, the same themes of anger and material desires. Krishna brings up anger a lot. And it's interesting, like even now in 2020, anger is a definite theme. So it's part of the human struggle. Very relatable theme.
Correct. Yeah, because here the things that we like, they get taken away from us, and we have to defend and protect our social status, our social position. And when we feel threatened, rather it is because something material is going to be taken away from me. Like, I can't help but to think, right? We are close to elections. So let's say I'm the sitting president, and then now there's this other guy who is running for president. He's going to take my position away. So I can't let that happen because this is something I have and it's mine, and you're going to take it away. So then I get into this anger, resentment, and so on, you know? So the next text 27 and 28. Would you like to read that, Kim?
Sure. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence, the transcendentalist aiming at liberation becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated.
See Krishna getting very yogic like here. You know,
Very, yeah.
talking about pranayam, which from Sanskrit, it's the practice of controlling your breath. It's a very important aspect of meditation or yoga, let's say, as it is known traditionally in the West. Uh, we know the effects of breath. We can say, you know, when you're really angry, before saying anything, just take 3 deep breaths, right? Like, what does that mean? It really helps you to calm down and not be so caught up with the dualities, be more have more equanimity of mind. And Krishna is even being yogic here and is talking about controlling the breaths. Actually, when we are inhaling, our heart rate actually slows down. Not necessarily that it beats less, but that the time between the heartbeats increases. And that gives our physical body a sensation of relaxation. So by taking a deep breath, and let's say slowly, let's say you take a deep breath and you count to 4. So you go, right, all the way to 4. That moment that you are inhaling, our heart rate is actually slowing down again, in the sense that the time between the beats are increased. And that has a very calming and relaxing effect in our bodies. So yeah, like letting go of anger, letting go of hate and lust, but take a deep breath, be calm, focus within, experience unlimited happiness there. Krishna right now is almost begging us. He's giving us everything we need to know philosophically. He is being repetitive. He is now even giving us physical exercises that we can do that will help us achieve this place that he's talking about having equanimity of mind and being able to go within. He's doing everything he can to help Arjuna, which really means to help us all who are reading this book, right? It really shows how much Krishna cares. And then it takes us to our last text of chapter 5.
Okay, in text 29, a person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries.
Now, there's a very interesting secret here. I say secret because it's not so apparent. So far, like even in chapter 5, Krishna was really praising knowledge, right? Knowledge of various kinds, knowledge of dualities, like we've been just talking about here, knowledge of I am not the body, but I am the soul, and that this knowledge is going to be liberating. that this knowledge is going to give you the tools which you need in order to achieve this peace, in order to achieve this unlimited happiness. Nevertheless, Krishna has been talking about knowledge, which was somewhat abstract, not really well defined, but rather just knowledge of various different things, but knowledge. Now, in this text, there is a turning point. Krishna says, a person in full conscious of me and knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of our sacrifices and austerities. So now Krishna has taken a turn, and he's now no longer placing knowledge towards these concepts that we've been talking about, such as I'm not the body, I'm the soul, learn how to deal with your dualities of the external material world. He's now no longer aiming that knowledge towards these concepts, but he's now urging us to aim that knowledge, to use that knowledge as knowledge of himself. So there's definitely the beginning of a turning here in Bhagavad Gita, where the text is going to start becoming really more theistic, where Krishna is going to start taking more of the center stage, and the things that we do is really going to be aimed towards developing our loving relationship with him, because now Krishna is saying, hey, have consciousness of me, and your knowledge is knowledge that allows you to know me, right? So now is really pointing towards a relationship with him. I know you had some thoughts around that, Kim. Would you like to speak more on this point?
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out, because when I first read this text, that point went right over my head, that, oh, yeah, Krishna did make a huge shift right now to all of a sudden he's talking about him being the knowledge, knowing him, and knowing him is going to then fulfill all of the desires that we had, or the idealistic behaviors that he laid out, the equanimity. And so making that shift from all of a sudden we're dealing with a person, an individual consciousness, is huge. I mean, the implications of that are all of a sudden you're not revering this energy. You're not revering, oh, some hypothetical pie in the sky, or, oh, I'm just going to stick with knowledge of the books and the scripts. You're now dealing with like a person. And that just changes everything, because you think about your relationships with actual people in the world, maybe your spouse who you love dearly, and thinking of having a relationship with Krishna as a person who you love dearly. What would you do for a person that you love? How would you allow a person who loves you to treat you, and what would you receive from them? And, you know, would you want to know more about them? And it just changes everything.
Yes, it's a wonderful way to end the chapter, I would say. You really, yeah, like a person, right? A God is a person that he wants us to love. He is giving us free will. And with that free will, we can be angry, right? We can really go for the dualities of the world and think, oh, I want this, but I don't have it. I want it. Somebody else have it, and I need to take it away from them. I'm lost, right, in that thought pattern. And I'm misusing my given free will, my God-given free will. God, however, is that from which everything comes. He's not lacking anything. He has everything. Everything is his energy, his power. The one thing that he doesn't necessarily have is our love. So if we are now using our free will to develop this relationship with a person, that's what he wants. He's a person. He wants our love, and this is a relationship. So this is a huge turn. Like you said, the implications of this text is huge, because now that's a person with feelings, with love, that we can engage in a relationship with. So by Krishna starting to assert himself as, like you said, individual consciousness with which we can have a relationship, is so exciting. It's foreshadowing what's to come next in the Bhagavad Gita. I think is a wonderful way to end the chapter. And yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. And the idea of God having feelings, when I first heard that, that blew my mind. Like, oh, I can actually hurt God's feelings, or God can be elated by my actions towards him or actions towards others. It's very interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you today. This was a great episode, and I really look
Thank
forward
you.
to the coming chapters of learning more about what it means or who Krishna is. So,
Exactly. Same here.
all right. Thank you everyone for joining, and we will be here again next week with Parangi. Haribol.
Haribo.